We hope you discover God's great grace, mercy, and peace. The Sweet Spot, an exclusive presentation of Faith Strong Today.
We have a special guest in the studio today, and I like to call him The Voice. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this individual.
The show was named after him, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yes.
Well, greetings, everybody. My name is Herbie Kuhn, and sitting between Diane and Michael, I am definitively in my sweet spot right now. There's no doubt about it. Just in case you're going, where have I heard that voice before? For the last 23 years, I've had the honor and the privilege of being the in-house voice of your Toronto Raptors, and now today, where I've had the opportunity to announce for Vince Carter and Chris Bosh and DeMar DeRozan and all these guys to 20,000 people, no. Nothing compares to where I sit today between these two individuals. My life has just taken an uptick, and I'm so grateful for it. Back to you, Diane.
So you see what I mean?
Yes.
We've got the one and only Herbie Kuhn sitting here in the sweet spot
HK.
with us.
Yes, sir.
I tell you, we're honored, Herbie.
I'm honored to be here.
Honored, man.
Thank you for the invitation.
Wow.
My goodness.
It's a privilege.
The rest of the day is just going to go noon in the air. My goodness, this is awesome.
This is great. This is
ma'am.
great.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you once again for being here. I tell you, I was excited. I've been on my husband, get Herbie. We want Herbie, get Herbie. We want him in the sweet spot. And when he told me you were coming, I was like, yes,
There you
finally.
Sometimes our schedules confound us,
I
don't
know,
they? Oh, my
I know, they do. But I tell you, our listeners are in for a treat today. They're in for a treat today
Yes,
because you
indeed.
are
Yes,
definitely
indeed.
a special individual.
Well, by God's grace, you might call me whatever adjective you want, but here we are. Let's move with it, and we'll see what happens.
Okay,
Right.
sounds
Excellent.
good. Sounds
Excellent.
good.
Yes.
Well, let's move to a place that
sir.
maybe you don't visit as often in interviews, and that is just your upbringing, right? Tell us about your family, brothers, sisters, and that whole kind of thing.
First of all, before you
Yes.
do that,
Yes.
I'm just going to slide this in there. Can you
Yes.
just say something in German?
Aber sicher, guten Morgen, alles. Wie geht's heute?
Yes!
Alles klar?
Okay. Now you can finish telling your upbringing.
I've had a lot of practice lately, so there you go. You know what? My wife, Stephanie, will always accuse me of being a victim of single child syndrome. That entitlement thing, whatever.
Yes.
Because apparently I used to get whatever I wanted. I disagree. Disagree wholeheartedly. So no siblings, Michael.
Yes.
No siblings, Diane. Born and raised in the East End of Toronto.
I say that because I was a single parent,
Yes.
or an only child
Yes.
for many years.
Definitely not a single parent.
Yeah. Yes.
No, definitely not a single parent.
Better not be.
So was an only child for the first 15 years,
Yeah.
right? And
Wow.
before
Yeah.
my mom married and had my little sister. So
Got it.
good,
Fantastic.
good.
No, you know what? I was born and raised in the beach area of Toronto, not far from the intersection of Queen and Woodbine. 6 blocks east of there is a wonderful street called Wheeler Avenue. Right at the foot of the street is the Beaches Library.
Yes.
And for those of you who are from the East End, it was a beautiful, quintessential neighborhood where you could walk down the street and you knew everybody. You walk up and down Wheeler Avenue, you walk up and down Ludi and Belfair and Lee Avenue, and you passed your neighbors, and everybody knew what was going on in other people's lives. And along Queen Street there, you had the local IGA, you had a Woolworths, you know what I'm saying? You had Woolworths, you remember that? We had, before it was Shoppers Drug Mart, there was one called Top Drug Mart, and we had all these wonderful independent establishments. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still wonderful down on the beach when I go down there, but it's become a little too corporate, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And there were a lot of like the Honeybee Chinese food place down there, the kind of place where I would go for my sweet and sour chicken balls and French fries, that kind of thing. So I grew up in that area, And I had the privilege of attending Williamson Road Public School, which was from junior kindergarten right through to grade 6.
Wow.
Right there in the beach area. Played hockey there, played all sorts of different sports there. Glen Ames Senior Public School for grades 7 and 8, which is right next door to Williamson Road. And then from Glen Ames, I went on and pursued a living to its fullest at the legendary Malvern Collegiate Institute, which has a great legacy for a lot of different things. A lot of great individuals have come out of Malvern.
So before we go too far, most vivid memory as a kid in grade school?
Boardwalk.
Yeah.
Boardwalk.
Boardwalk.
That just...
I grew up a 5-minute walk from Lake Ontario.
Wow.
I grew up a 5-minute walk from being able to turn right out of my driveway and walk straight down, cross the crosswalk at Belfair, and head right down to the lake. And that is where, at that hockey rink down there, I played lacrosse from the age of 6. And I learned to skate down there, and you're only about 150 feet from Lake Ontario with the whipping winds coming up there. And if I had a prototypical image in my mind of my life growing up, it was being in that Kew Gardens, in that park down there, down by the boardwalk, down by Lake Ontario, being able to sit there and just soak in God's creation. Even though I didn't categorize it as such back in those days, but I just loved being by that large body of water and looking out forever. That was my soul.
That was your sweet spot.
Yeah, that was my sweet spot. There's no doubt about it. And then a real turning point happened for me in grade 8 when my mom and dad finally acquiesced to all of my badgering, and we got this beautiful little part German Shepherd, part Labrador named Princess. And she was 2 months old. She was 2 months old at the time, and Princess lived for over 14 years. Wow. And if you want to talk about the quintessential relationship between a boy and his dog, this was it.
That was it.
Wow.
Myself and that dog, we spent hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours along that boardwalk, 3-kilometer stretch from Ashbridges Bay out on the west end, all the way across to where the Bombay Beach Rugby Club is, the Bombay Beach Rowing Club down in the east end, and in the park and all the trails and whatnot, and going out to the harbor there. And even just thinking about it makes me emotional and makes me really, really miss those days.
Wow. So it seems like it was just the two of you a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who was there a best friend before Princess?
Absolutely. Got to give a big shout out to my boy Carl Camilleri. Absolutely. Carl, who lives in Halton Region now, lives in Burlington, and Carl and I have been friends since we were 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
Known each other. He grew up the street from me. I grew up down the street from him. And Carl, and then once we got to high school, another group of friends. You know, there were a lot of friends, obviously, back in public school. Too many to name. But Carl would have been my number one guy back then, and he and I are still friends to this day.
That's beautiful.
And he's coming to the Raptors game this Sunday, so I'll get to see him again. I'll get to see him again, absolutely.
So then, what would the two of you do together most? What would be?
Oh my goodness, mischief. Playing, actually, probably road hockey.
Okay.
Road hockey was the number one thing. You know, I hate to admit it, but busting out taillights on cars with, with the follow-throughs of our slap shots and our, stuff like that.
Not intentionally.
Not intentionally. No, it just kind of happened. Follow through. I'm sorry about that. Carl and I played a lot of road hockey, a lot of time down in that nature down there, setting up a ramp on a pile of bricks and riding our bikes off of it, and just being boys.
Right.
Just being boys. There were a few other names that I could throw in there, but Carl was the guy who we spent a lot of time with.
Most vivid memories of your parents. How would you characterize your parents as a kid?
Faithful, hardworking. Consistency will be the words that come to mind. My mom, for the first portion of my upbringing, was a stay-at-home mom, and we have to categorize this. Both of them I'm a first-generation Canadian. Both of them immigrants to the beautiful land of opportunity that we call Canada. Dad from the former West Germany came here in 1963, if I'm not mistaken, working for Robert Bosch Car Parts Company, and he met my mom while he was here. When it was time for him to go back, he said, "No, I'm staying." And my mom from beautiful Guyana in South America, where she came to work as a domestic. That was the term they used at the time, working in rich Jewish people's households in the Bathurst and Eglinton area.
Wow.
Okay.
And in 1964 or early 65, those two met. And November the 27th, 1965, they were married, and we just celebrated last November their 52nd wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
by God's grace. And my mom, strict, no nonsense, West Indian mama. You know, you don't talk back, you don't argue.
Yes.
So by the love and the consistency, and it's really interesting the way it worked out because my mom was the very vocal one. The I love you. Oh, you always know how much you love. My dad wasn't like that at all. He was more the stoic, German, prototypical, proud man kind of thing. Yet I never doubted my dad's love for me.
Right.
I would never hear him say it, but I could feel him say it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So whether it was through his consistency with all of my sporting endeavors, I played 10 years of travel lacrosse and probably 10 to 12 years of competitive hockey, including the MTHL, or what's now the GTA, Metropolitan Toronto Hockey League back at the time. And, you know, we had 2 games, practices every week, and I could count on one hand the number of times my dad wasn't there at one of those practices or goals. And that just spoke. And this is while he was doing shift work.
War games.
This is while he was doing shift work for Canada Post as a maintenance technician, making sure all the machines were working smoothly. And I don't know how he pulled it off.
Wow.
And as a dad now of a young athlete, I know how tough it is to keep up with all those training sessions and things like that. And but he pulled it off.
That's
So
beautiful.
back to your original question, consistency, faithfulness, always there for me, always providing, sometimes more times a plenty, sometimes things were a little bit leaner, but we'd always have a beaten up Volkswagen in the driveway.
So this natural affinity to sport. So lacrosse or hockey, which one was the favorite?
Which one was the favorite? I got to go with hockey.
Yes.
Yeah. I started skating when I was 3. I think I probably knew how to skate just about the same time I knew how to walk.
Okay.
but in terms of organized sport, I started off with lacrosse.
Yes.
That was age 6, sponsored on the back of my jersey by Joe's Bananas. I'll never forget that. And I was a goalie. I was a goalie right from the get-go in lacrosse. And so I played lacrosse for 10 years. You know, got to travel all over the province and a little bit out of the province. But hockey was definitely my first love.
So let's go back to German and Guyanese.
Yes.
That's some kind of mixture.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
That's a little different.
Yeah.
So growing up, like, did you speak German in your house? Did you, like, how was that?
It was interesting because I was born in 1969, so my parents had been married for 4 years already. My dad's English at that time was quite accomplished, but he was still working on it. He was still developing it, and he still had a very, very strong German accent. So for that reason, we did not speak a lot of German in the household. Now, I was privileged to have family members from Germany come and visit us regularly. I was privileged to be able to go to Germany a couple of times and make visits there, to visit family there, and then as soon as they could, my parents enrolled me in some private German classes.
That's right.
As well. So that made a difference. But we did not speak, and I'll be honest with you, much to my dismay, I wish we had spoken it more within the house. So I know kids today who have Spanish-speaking parents or Romanian-speaking parents, and that's all they speak in the house.
Right, yes.
And then they go and speak English at their schools.
Exactly, yes.
And I love that. So you've got kids who are 7, 8, 9 years old who are completely fluently bilingual.
Yes.
And I wish I could say that I am that. I'm not fluent in German. I can get by.
Right.
I'm not fluent in French. I can get by.
Right.
I'm pretty good at English. We're still working. Yeah. But to your point, Diane, that mix of German and Guyanese, we're talking mid-1960s here.
Yeah.
Okay? Wow. I mean, here we are in Black History Month.
Exactly.
And you don't need to say much more than that.
That's what I was asking.
My dad has articulated to me about stories of him walking down the street with my mom and getting comments from people on the way by. And I'm not going to go into detail about those comments, but just, overall negative comments. What are you doing with her? Well, that kind of thing. And they decided that love came first. They decided that the skin color was absolutely irrelevant, and they decided that love came first. They fell in love with each other, and that was all that mattered. And
I love that.
And you have to put that into perspective, because my dad's German side of the family, he was one of 6 siblings. He was one of 6 siblings. He was the only one to leave the country.
Wow.
And imagine him coming back to Germany for the first time with a black wife. They received it, to their credit, they received it very well. They received it very well. There was no what are you doing with this woman or anything, that kind of that. But let's be honest, it was an adjustment for them.
Right.
This is my dad, who when he was a young person was listening to Satchmo, okay? He was listening to Louis Armstrong when his friends were listening to whatever they were listening to at the times back in the 50s and whatnot. And my dad was listening to Louis B. Armstrong, the great Satchmo. And this was the kind of stuff he was a different thinker.
Yes.
He was a different thinker. So here they are in Canada, and they got married in 1965, like I said. And they persevered. They had their work. I
Beautiful.
came along in '69. They persevered. They grew up in what was predominantly a white neighborhood in the Beach. You know, it was at that point it was a more middle class neighborhood. Now it's become more higher end. But at that point it was a very regular family middle class neighborhood. But it was a predominantly white neighborhood. And so I was a bit of an anomaly. My skin obviously isn't very dark. However, if I let this grow. If I let this grow any longer, excuse me. If I let this grow, when I was a kid, I had a full-fledged afro.
Wow!
I had the afro out to here, and you could tell from that that there was a mix there, right? You could tell. I don't personally remember being at the receiving end of any racial troubles growing up.
You're too lovable.
Maybe that's it. Maybe, yeah, but you know what, Michael? I appreciate that, but we all know that lovable doesn't make a difference when you got some people whose mindset in one way, right?
That's right.
And my mom used to always warn me, you're going to, things are going to be a little bit tougher for you because you've got black in you. You know, you may not have this opportunity because you've got some black in you. And I just, I would listen to it, I would receive it. And I don't remember that being the case significantly in my upbringing, by God's grace. Having said that, what I do remember is a wonderful, solid upbringing.
Awesome.
Surrounded by two parents who were willing to work hard and sacrifice, who surrounded our household with incredible love and provided for me. And I never really felt like a single child because I had so many friends in the neighborhood.
Right.
Yes.
So many friends, sleepovers.
Wow.
I'm there and they're here, and it was great. And when you're playing lacrosse and hockey, you make friends with all those families,
teammates
your teammates and their
absolutely.
families. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You got it.
Now, so this beautiful, really balanced, strong, although from outward looking in could have been a little bit more turbulent, but very balanced, solid, firm upbringing to where you are today. Is that like what happened? I know the sport makes sense,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So that definitely, the confidence you portray makes sense, right? But what actually sort of is this? What? Let me ask you this: what did you want to be when you were in grade 8 and Princess first came on the scene?
What I wanted to be, Michael, was a professional hockey player. What I wanted to be was a goalie in the NHL. That was my definitive goal.
Yes.
From a very young age. I played hockey, rep hockey, the MTHL, played at Williamson Road, played hockey at Glen Ames. Got to play while I was in grade 8 at Glen Ames in the city final on the ice at Maple Leaf Gardens. Oh,
nice.
Imagine being 14 years old playing at Maple Leaf Gardens, the mecca of Canadian hockey.
Yes.
Being able to play there. Yes.
Yes.
And we won that championship game 3-2 with me in the net, and I actually got my name in the paper. That was pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. That was the goal back then. However, once it became obvious that pro hockey was not going to be part of my future, excuse me, at least not as a player, I set my sights on pro sports. Okay. I knew that whatever I was going to do, whether it was as a therapist or an announcer or as a coach or as an athlete or whatever, I knew that I wanted to be involved in professional sports. I had no clue what that was going to look like. No clue.
So go ahead.
My mom, my praying Guyanese mother.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, I pray that my son will end up in full-time ministry one day. I pray that my son will honor you and live for you and be able to have a full-time calling in ministry one day. And look at what the Lord has done. We'll get into that in a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. But to put it together, God took my ambitious goals and dreams,
and
the prayers of a praying mom, and He wove them together. And here we are, as you say, to where I am today.
Okay. So when did you discover you had the magic that we all get to listen to?
That was my next question. Yes.
This hoarse, coughing voice today. Sometime after puberty, I don't know. At some point, the voice went down a couple of notches.
Like, were people telling you, like, Herbie, you have this voice?
I remember one time, Diane, recording something for a class I can't remember what it was, on an audio cassette, obviously. And I remember the teacher listening back to it and going, Herbie, you got a really good voice. You should be, considering that for a tool for your living, whatnot. Okay, yeah, whatever. And then in high school, I really got turned on to theater. I really got turned on to acting and being on a stage. And I discovered that I had the gift of being able to project. And I had a deep voice, and I was confident, and that whether I was playing myself or playing somebody else, I loved being up in front of groups of people. I loved doing that. I had no problem with getting up in front of a group of 200, 550, a class, whatever it was. That came as a gifting to me. So I'm very grateful.
Wow.
I'm very grateful for that. I think where things turned a really peculiar corner was in high school. Believe it or not, I was working at a grocery store as a part-time job.
Okay.
And I used to record the weekly specials.
Oh.
That would go over the public address system in the store.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, Mr. Grocer used to be on Coxwell Avenue, Coxwell between Upper and Lower Girard. I worked at the Mr. Grocer there, and I used to record the weekly specials. And I remember, because they would play automatically, right? So I'd be down in the aisles and stocking shelves and helping customers and whatnot. And customers would be passing by, and they had no clue that it was me standing next to them who had done those. And man, that guy's got a good voice. Boy, he should be doing that, professionally. Well, I wonder if he's on radio, and so on and so forth.
Wow.
So that led to, I got enough comments about that. And then people found out that it was me. Then I went to Vanier College for 2 years, 92, 93, 93, 94, out in beautiful Saint-Laurent, Quebec, a suburb of Montreal. And while I was there, I started my own, I had a radio show on the Vanier College radio station. And
that was your first official show?
That was my first official.
So what did you talk about then? What was it? What's the show?
It was the Herbie Kuhn Hot Tub Radio Expose.
Hot Tub Radio Expose. Okay.
You can tell where my mind was back in the day.
Yes.
And back then, I played a lot of rock and roll. Played a lot of rock and roll, and it was simply just me sharing some personal thoughts and playing some of my favorite music. Right. So back then, that was the early 90s, so I'm playing stuff like the Stones and Van Halen and Bon Jovi and things like that.
Right.
And
rocking out.
Yeah, just rocking out. And it was, you had a window there so people could see you in the studio, and I was just having the time of my life. I was having the time. But I thought to myself, this is cool. I'm talking to a microphone, and people are listening, and they're loving it. And it was also at Vanier College. As you can tell, Vanier was paramount to my life, where I started doing PA announcing for the first time. So it was late August, early September of 1992 where I first announced a football game for Vanier College against Vieux Montréal, Old Montreal. And that was where I had my, to be quite honest with you, an epiphany about announcing. To be quite honest with you.
Okay.
I was on top of an equipment shed, about 15 feet in the air, halfway between the visitor's bench and the home bench. And they gave me a microphone with a cord about 50 feet long. They said, go ahead and announce the game. And so I'm doing, first and 10, pass complete, gain of 7, second and 3. And I'm just having a fun time. I figured they're going to pay me $20 to do this. This is awesome.
$20 old bucks.
Hey, $20 when you're a college student out of town?
Yes.
I could buy a loaf of bread, 4 liters of milk, 6-pack. Anyways. Yes. And I'm up there, and then Vanier scored a touchdown. And this is where I had my epiphany. Vanier scored a touchdown, and I belted it out. Touchdown for the Cheetahs! And the fans on the other side started jumping up and screaming. And the players on the field are all looking up. Yeah! And they're high-fiving each other. And I looked at the microphone. I went, I screamed. Now they're screaming. And they're going to pay me $20. This is really good. And I had an epiphany at that very moment that maybe somehow one day I could talk into a microphone and be compensated for it as part of my living.
My goodness. So give us the path up till today.
Yes.
Who did you announce for next?
So 2 years of basketball and football at Vanier College.
Yes.
Vanier had 4 basketball teams. We had men's and women's AA, men's and women's AAA.
Oh, wow.
1994.
That's a lot of basketball.
Yes, a lot of basketball. During the tail end of that was when Toronto and Vancouver were granted the inaugural Canadian NBA franchises.
Yes.
Right.
you know what? That really should be my job. I think that's going to be my job one day, announcing for those Raptors. Yeah. But in the meantime, John Bitov's group hosted the World Championships here in 1994. You may remember August of 1994, Dream Team 2. Shaq was on that team. Isaiah was supposed to be on that team. Dan Marley was on that team. So those games were played at Copps Coliseum, Maple Leaf Gardens, and Skydome at the time.
That's right.
I sent in a videotape of highlights of me announcing at Vanier College. Pardon me. To this gentleman named Brian Cooper, who I found out was going to, you know who I'm talking about, who I found out was going to be hiring the PA announcers for those World Championships. And I called the poor guy every several weeks and said, "Hi, Mr. Cooper, it's Herbie again. Hi, Mr. Cooper, it's Herbie again." Anyways, long story short, they hired me to be one of about a dozen announcers during those World Championships. Wow. My first game was Croatia versus Cuba at Maple Leaf Gardens, the same place that I had idolized growing up, the same place where I'd played hockey as a 13, 14-year-old in a city final. Then I get to go back to MLG, to Maple Leaf Gardens, and announce Croatia versus Cuba in these World Championships. And I'm just looking around thinking, how is this happening? Anyways, long story short, by the time those World Championships were done, I had received some significant favor. And I had announced for 13 of the 16 countries during the World Championships.
Wow.
And unbeknownst to me, Brian Cooper and his team would be responsible for hiring the first PA announcer for the Raptors a year down the road. Wow. There's an old adage that says, you never know who you're going to come into contact with. You got to make you never get a second chance to make a good first impression, right? Yes. So apparently, by God's grace, I made a good first impression. Again, I call Mr. Cooper every 3 or 4 weeks. Hey, Mr. Cooper, I'm announcing at Humber College. Hey, Mr. Cooper, I'm announcing at the Junior Nationals. Humber College was my first regular PA announcing gig here in the GTA. I want to give a shout out to Doug Fox out there, who's the athletics director at Humber College. He was the first one who gave me a job announcing for the Humber Hawks in 1995, the winter of 1995. I started announcing volleyball and basketball for the Humber Hawks out at the North Campus. And so I'm announcing at Humber, I'm announcing all these different opportunities, high schools, Eastern Commerce, whatever experience I can get. Hi, Mr. Cooper, it's Herbie again. Hi, Mr. Cooper, it's Herbie again. And one day I got a phone call from him. Herbie, I'm sorry, I've got really bad news. We've hired somebody else. And I thought, what? You told me I thought there was going to be this, I thought there was going to be that. And I was heartbroken. And I remember getting home that afternoon. I walked in the back door of our house. My mom was in the kitchen. And she just looked. She said, "Oh, something's wrong." I said, "Mom, they took my job from me." I didn't say they took the job from me. They took my job from me. And I sat down. I went up to my room, sat at my desk, and I wrote a letter. "Dear Mr. Bitov, my name is Herbie Kuhn. You and I have met during the World..." I said, "It's time to check out the local talent. Signed sincerely, Herbie Kuhn." I wasn't going to roll over without a fight.
Wow.
I don't know to this day if he ever actually got that letter, but I did send it.
Wow.
About 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from a lady by the name of Jamie Nishino, who was Brian Cooper's assistant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she says, "Hey, Herbie, it's Jamie. Hey, Jamie, what's going on? Are you able to come down to the office sometime soon? We want to talk to you about the PA announcer's position." Yes, absolutely, I'll be there. Tell me when. So I went down there a couple days later, walked into their office at Water Park Place down to the foot of Bay, and first words out of their mouth, "Herbie, we'd like you to be our PA announcer, the first PA announcer for the Raptors." So it turns out the person who they'd offered to originally, I'm not going to say names, but he turned it down because they weren't offering enough money. So I was choice number 2, and I've been in seat number 1 for 23 years now.
Wow.
So
Favor.
God's got a sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
God's got a sense of humor.
Time has gone so fast.
Yes.
Would you end us this way?
Yes.
Would you give us just a reduced version? Because we know you have to do it tonight, right?
Yes.
Just to reduce, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. Basketball fans, would you please welcome the starters for your Toronto Raptors! And your starting backcourt at shooting guard, Diane Clemens. And bringing the ball up the floor, your point guard, Michael Clemens.
Oh my goodness, Herbie, you are amazing.
There you go.
Thank you so much for joining us here in the Sweet Spot.
All right, good.
Hallelujah.
This has been amazing.
All right,
This has been
so
amazing.
we've got another portion to cover. So
All right.
we're going to ask you to hang around
Sounds good.
and we're going to do some more of this. And now you're going to have to tune in next week.
All right.
Thank you for joining us here in the Sweet Spots. Herbie, once again, you are amazing. To our listeners, thank you, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. And until next time, stay in your sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
What a story.